Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. Boy, we got a lot to get to today, including what's happening at the southern border and in nursing homes, both in our state and elsewhere. But first, to the race for mayor of Seattle. What happens in Seattle in this election is no doubt going to dictate Seattle's rise or fall and could have impacts that extend far beyond the city limits. As we first reported, former City Council President Bruce Harrell has now entered the race. He and I spoke about his vision for the city and his disappointment in what it has become.
It's always good to have change.
I last spoke with Bruce Harrell in 2019 after he announced he would not seek re-election to the city council.
Certainly, the atmosphere's changed. There's, I think, unprecedented anger.
His tone at the time was basically a commercial for The Divide. Harrell disappointed in the climate at City Hall and the often poisonous nature of political discourse.
I welcome disagreements on policy, disagreements on opinion. I do not welcome impugning a person's integrity or the intent.
I would like to introduce Mr. Bruce Harrell.
Interesting, then, that just 2 years later, during arguably a much more polarized time, Harrell would choose to re-enter city politics in a big way, launching his bid for mayor. This city has been chewing up leaders and spitting them out. Your friend Carmen Best, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan, who I know you've also known for a long time, doesn't seek a second term. Yet, wasn't scandal-plagued or something like an Ed Murray. Why would you want the job right now? I mean, are you watching that? And I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who sees that and says, sign me up.
Because that's where the opportunity is. It's easy. It's easy to hop into a situation where things are just going fine. But things have never been easy in my life. They've never been easy. And I've never been afraid to take the hard road. I know exactly what I'm getting into. But that's been my life story. I don't talk a lot about my own personal struggles. I figure no one wants to hear about them. But my family members know how I've had to overcome many things to get to where I am. Now's the right opportunity for someone like me with my story. I embrace it.
Harrell, a moderate by Seattle standards, will face perhaps his toughest challenge from current City Council President Lorena Gonzalez, a progressive who led the effort on police defunding.
And when you want to build an effective organization, you do not starve it from resources. Right. You have the right training. You make the right investments. You change the culture through the right interaction.
But much like Gonzalez, Harrell will have to run on his record at City Hall. He spent 12 years on the council, during which some of Seattle's most profound crises only deepened. People are going to look at your time at City Hall and say, well, these problems existed when he was there, too.
So there's a fundamental difference between a mayor and a city council member. And what people are saying in the policies that have come out of City Hall are actually pretty effective. They're pretty rich. An example would be, we developed the property that if you remove someone from an encampment, you have to offer them housing. We developed policies that would require housing first. In other words, I'm not going to criticize you for being for needing drug and alcohol treatment. We're going to house you first. So there are actually some rich policies coming out of City Hall. What's not coming out of City Hall is implementation of some of those policies and new ideas.
During a press conference announcing his bid, Harrell outlined some of his ideas for dealing with issues like homelessness, including an intense focus on jobs.
As mayor, I will create for the first time a Seattle Jobs Center. Looking at all of the commercial available tools online, looking at the Washington State Unemployment Office, looking at executive search firms, we will have a portal at the city because at the end of the day, it's about jobs, jobs, and jobs. And in addition to the Job Center, we will make sure that we realign people and retool them with the educational support and the kind of training to allow them to empower themselves, because there's nothing more empowering than having a good job, being able to walk through and say, I have a good job, I'm using my talents.
He says he would also change the way money is allotted in the budget.
We've changed our city council to a district structure, yet we have not fundamentally changed how we allocate monies to communities and meet their needs. Under my administration, we're going to take approximately $10 million and allocate it to the 7 districts and have those council members work with each community to define what their needs are, whether it's addressing homelessness, public safety, cleanliness, preserving cultural institutions. We're going to engage with communities to make sure that those dollars are pumped right into communities and their needs are met.
In addition to putting forth ideas, Harrell will also have to contend with an electorate and a media that likes to assign labels. In 2019, candidates considered more business-friendly did not fare well. Harrell hopes to avoid the same fate.
They can label me any way they want, but at the end of the day, I'm an independent thinker.
But while he tries to shirk labels that something could sink his campaign, the reality is that a lot has changed since the 2019 elections in Seattle. The city has gone through a pandemic, months of unrest, a divisive debate over policing, and seen crises like homelessness and drug abuse proliferate. Not to mention that downtown is just a shell of what it once was. Voters will now have to decide if they will welcome a candidate who is willing to be blunt about the state of our once thriving city.
I think it's very fitting that during the coming of spring, where we think about a rebirth and revitalization, a resurrection, if you will, that it's appropriate that I announce my candidacy. And people ask, of course, the inevitable question, why? And I say, in so many words, look what Seattle has become.
Look what Seattle has become, indeed. I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. And I think a rebirth is a good description for what the city needs. Also, coming up next week, another candidate in the race for mayor has just announced her campaign.
I'm Jessin Farrell, and I want to be your mayor because we can be so much more than this.
Former state representative Jessin Farrell is expected to join us on The Divide next week. She ran for mayor back in 2017, but did not advance to the general election. We're going to discuss with her what she hopes will be different this time around. And by the way, we've been doing these interviews with Seattle mayoral candidates. If you missed any of them, you can find them on The Divide podcast. Make sure to download and subscribe. We post new episodes every Monday. All right, coming up after the break. Is there a crisis at the southern border? President Biden won't say the word, but is it fair to compare what's happening now to what happened under Donald Trump? Also, we're going to take an in-depth look at our state's handling of nursing homes during the pandemic. Stick around. The United States is confronting a worsening crisis at the southern border. Migrants fleeing their home countries in droves, some hoping it will be easier to get into the United States under President Biden than it was under President Donald Trump. And let's be honest, the images out of the southern border are heartbreaking. Just as heartbreaking as they were back in 2018 when we traveled to the border near El Paso, Texas. We were there because Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan and other Democrats were at the border trying to gain access into facilities where migrant children were being held and railing against the policies of the Trump administration. So nearly 3 years later, what does Mayor Durkan think now about what's unfolding at the border under a different president? The situation at the southern border, President Biden refuses to call it a crisis. Do you believe that there is a crisis at the southern border?
I think that we have a crisis generally globally right now. We are seeing so many more economic and climate refugees, and we will continue to see those. And so we can't be surprised that our southern border is reflecting that. I'm very, I am happy that the president is recognizing we need to do more for children who are coming here unaccompanied and making sure that they have places to stay that are safe, sanitary, and that they're held in great conditions. I also think, or better conditions, let me make that very clear, that I didn't mean that's great, because no one wants to be holding those children. But the other thing that's very different from the previous administration is no one is using separating children from their parents as a strategy. That was the stated strategy of the previous administration, and it was wrong. They said, don't come here, because if you do, we will take your children from you. Then they did take their children from them, and then they deported the parents without their children. That was immoral, and it remains immoral. We still don't know where the parents are for hundreds of children that were kept by the previous administration. So I'm hoping that the president finds a way forward. That it's incredibly challenging at the southern border. We have to admit it's challenging, and it won't get any better because of the economics that are present in the globe. So no, it's not going to be a quick fix or an easy fix, but I do appreciate that the president is starting from the basis of we will treat people as compassionately and humanely as we can, and recognize that some people come here as refugees with the right to enter this country.
That being said, we don't really know how they're being treated. You know, you went down to the southern border during this crisis in the Trump administration. I stood with you at a fence outside of El Paso where migrant teens were being held, and you were upset, along with other mayors, that you weren't being allowed inside to see the conditions that these teenagers were being held in. The Biden administration so far has not let reporters inside those very same facilities. Do you believe that the Biden administration should give reporters access?
I don't know all the facts for that, but I think you should have transparency and access. And I think that it's really important for any administration to be open and forthright with what they're doing. I know that I've seen a lot of pictures from the border of Republicans in Texas, making claims. But I've also talked to some of the mayors in Texas, and they say that the situation is much different. But we need to hold every administration accountable, and we want to make sure that this administration follows through with what some of its promises are. But that also includes getting immigration reform. And if the Republicans in Congress continue to block even the ability to keep the kids, who are now some adults on DACA here, let's start really getting a humane path forward.
Really quickly, because I think we're both running out of time. It's just fascinating to me. Like I said, I was, and I would perhaps be at the southern border if it weren't for the COVID crisis, which didn't exist when you went with Democratic mayors. You guys went down there kind of in a group, and certainly to send a message. And now you see Republican lawmakers doing the same thing that you guys did under the Trump administration. Basically the same situation when it comes to the crisis. Is this just political theater? Is it political theater?
No, and I got to stop you there, because I think, it's great your program's called The Divide. And one thing we don't do to create a divide is to have false equivalencies.
What's false equivalency about it, though?
You do not have a president of the United States who stands before the people and says, don't come here or we will take your children from you, and then follows through with that threat. Using children as a tool to enforce immigration strategy is immoral. And so that is a false equivalency. Now, I don't have all the details of what they're doing, but I think we have to be very careful to say, will there continue to be pressure on the southern border? Absolutely. And is it going to be incredibly challenging in a crisis at some times? Unquestionably. But the moral standpoint from which we start, I think, has a great deal to do on how we treat what happens down at the border.
Yeah, but we can all agree, politics aside, that whether it was under Trump or under Biden, the situation at the southern border involving an influx of migrants is a really challenging situation for the government to deal with.
100%. And I think, and followed from that is, in the way you cannot deal with it, is to just unilaterally decide you will take children from their parents and have no plan to reunite them. You will use the children as weapons and think that they can be a deterrent. I think that was what was so different about the approach of the previous administration.
And look, the mayor is right. The President Trump, did talk about family separation as a possible deterrent. And it's very clear that the priorities of the two presidents and the priorities of the two major parties are vastly different. And I'm going to talk more about that today to close the show. But first, we have another story that we want to get to. Nationally, there has been heightened scrutiny over how states handled nursing homes in the early stages of the pandemic. Of course, front and center is Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, under fire for forcing nursing homes to take patients from hospitals without a test first, and later covering up just how many of the state's elderly died. And that brings me to an article that's been floating around about our governor, Jay Inslee, that I have been emailed about quite a bit. The article, written by Ari Hoffman and posted to the Post Millennial, is headlined, "Is Jay Inslee the next Andrew Cuomo? Washington State offered funds to nursing homes to accept COVID patients." Okay, so a few things there. First, let's talk about that headline, though. While posed as a question, it clearly insinuates that Governor Inslee could have done something just as egregious as Cuomo, a governor who is being directly blamed for the deaths of thousands of people and whose job is hanging on by a thread. Now, I'm going to take you through the facts of this situation, but let me just state something off the top. How our state handled nursing homes is not comparable to how New York and Governor Cuomo handled them. It really is not even close. There are some significant differences of fact. So let's go through those one by one, shall we? First, in New York, Governor Cuomo mandated that nursing homes take even COVID-positive hospital patients. The March 25th memo read, "No resident shall be denied readmission or admission to the nursing home solely based on a confirmed or suspected diagnosis of COVID-19. Another key difference in New York, Governor Cuomo prohibited nursing homes from giving COVID tests prior to patients being transferred into their facilities. The March 25th memo read, "Nursing homes are prohibited from requiring a hospitalized resident who is determined medically stable to be tested for COVID-19 prior to admission or readmission." So not only did he force nursing homes to take hospital patients in the middle of a pandemic, but he did so knowing that he was preventing those facilities from properly protecting their other residents. Neither of those things happened in our state. That's a fact. Another key difference, Governor Cuomo's administration covered up the number of dead and then tried to use verbal gymnastics to explain it away by blaming everyone else for simply misunderstanding.
The void we created by not providing information was filled with skepticism and cynicism and conspiracy theories, which furthered the confusion.
Yeah, okay. So with those key factual differences established between New York and Washington, let's do away with the narrative that Washington's handling of nursing homes is comparable in any way to New York's. It's not. Now, that being said, there is value in scrutinizing Governor Inslee's handling of this issue on its own merits without comparing it to another state. So here is what we know to be true. Since March 5th, 2020 through February 20th, 2021, 2,111 patients were transferred from hospitals into Washington's long-term care facilities. While the state did not mandate those transfers, it did offer an added Medicaid incentive for facilities to take those transfers. This is the March 20th letter referenced in the Post-Millennial story, the red lines, that's from Post-Millennial. So this is the letter where this incentive is laid out. Now, what's important to note, and stick with me here, is that the incentive was not specific to transferring COVID patients out of hospitals into long-term care facilities. The letter does not specify what kind of patients should be transferred. It does say capacity is needed in hospitals because of the coronavirus pandemic. But the letter is just trying to encourage long-term care facilities to accept patients they otherwise might not, thus the incentive. According to the state, I called them about this. I'm like, what does this mean? They say that this could include people who are severely mentally ill or disabled. The state says that the letter was not offering an incentive to specifically accept COVID-positive patients from hospitals. And that is true. It does not say that specifically in the letter. However, clearly the state was aware that any patients being transferred from a hospital into a long-term care facility during a pandemic could have COVID-19. So on March 24th, the state issued guidance. Take a look at this. Again, this letter was published by the Post-Millennial, but it was verified as authentic by the state. The letter gives guidance on accepting a resident with COVID-19 from a hospital. It reads, long-term care facilities should admit residents with COVID-19 who are no longer acutely ill back to their long-term care residences. So that seems pretty clear that the state knew long-term care facilities might be taking in COVID-positive patients from hospitals. And so the state gave guidance on how to take precautions to prevent further spread within the facilities. Now, importantly, there is no data available from the state on how many patients transferred from hospitals could have been COVID positive. The state did tell us that most nursing homes were requiring 2 negative COVID tests prior to patient transfer, but that was not a state requirement. Here's what else we know when it comes to the numbers. Since the start of the pandemic, long-term care facilities in our state have accounted for more than 19,000 of all positive COVID cases. That's about 5%. But those same facilities accounted for nearly half of all COVID deaths in our state, more than 2,500. And given the fact that there is absolutely no way of knowing whether any of those deaths were a direct result of hospital patients being transferred into long-term care facilities, I asked Governor Inslee to reflect on the state's decision to allow those transfers in the first place. Here is our full exchange.
We know that nationally there's been heightened scrutiny over how states handled nursing homes in the early stages of the pandemic. Here in Washington, you incentivize nursing homes to take patients from hospitals to create capacity. Should the state have allowed, let alone incentivized, those transfers given the risk of death to that population?
I don't see a reason to second guess that decision. We had a looming critical shortage of space in our hospitals, so I would not second guess that decision based on the rearview mirror.
So that is what we know. And now you know the factual differences between how our state and New York handled nursing homes and long-term care facilities during the pandemic. And hopefully you can take that information and use it to help inform your perspective on the issue. All right, coming up after the break, we're going back to the border with a look at the solution that is right in front of the face of Congress. Stick around. I want to start this commentary by giving the press some credit. When it comes to the situation on the southern border, the media is doing its job, holding the president accountable for refusing to call it a crisis, holding him accountable for things he said on the campaign trail that could have led migrants to believe that America would welcome them under his leadership, no questions asked, holding the administration accountable for not letting reporters inside detention facilities to see firsthand the conditions where kids are being held. The media is asking all the right questions. And I guess I'm feeling generous today. I want to give politicians a little bit of credit as well for, by and large, remaining consistent on what their primary concern is along the border. As was the case during the Trump administration, Republicans remain concerned more so about border security, about drug and human traffickers taking advantage of migrants and taking advantage of the system. And as was the case during the Trump administration, Democrats remain focused more so on the humanitarian side of things, trying to do what's right for especially the children that wind up in the care of our government. And I know most people would look at those disparate concerns and see a divide in priorities, a divide in morality, a divide in what we deem necessary and prudent. But what I see is an opportunity to prevent future presidents from confronting the same crisis, because that's what this is. It is a crisis. It is beyond a crisis at this point. I think that most of us, whether we choose to say it or not, are aware that neither political party is being honest about the complete picture at the border. But like pieces of a puzzle, if they could only come together, the right solution is right in front of them. The reality is that there is no end to the humanitarian issue without a security solution. And there is no security solution until we can get a hold of the humanitarian issue. And everyone in Congress knows that. Every single person in Congress knows that. So all we're left to believe is that they'd rather complain about who created it than actually confront the crisis. All right, thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. Don't forget to download and subscribe to The Divide podcast, and I'll see you all tomorrow on Q13 News This Morning.